can't believe I'm saying this, but welcome to the 200th episode of Spectacular Science. Feels like just yesterday I published my first episode about plants, and feels like just yesterday I published my 100th episode, but look where we are right now. This is the 200th episode. It's a very, very big milestone for me, for Spectacular Science, and for my audience, you. So thank you so much for coming along with this journey with me, and I'm so excited to do this 200th episode special full of celebration. And this entire episode is going to be all about exercise and moving your body and what impacts it has on your brain. This episode, I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Charles Hillman from Northeastern University. He studies how exercise impacts the brain. And it's so cool to see all these studies happening because exercise is something that you might do every day and actually impacts your body in endless positive ways. Also, stay tuned until the end of this episode because we have some special announcements and a look back over these years that I've been doing Spectacular Science, a look back into what's been going on, all the evolution that's been going on. But now, here's the interview with Dr. Hillman, all about exercise. Let's go! Hello, Dr. Hillman.
Hi, Akshay.
Thank you so much for joining me for this special 200th episode.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on it.
All right, so let's get right into this. But first, can you please introduce yourself to the listeners?
Sure. I'm Chuck Hillman. I am a professor at Northeastern University. I hold appointments in the Department of Psychology and the Department of Physical Therapy, Movement and Rehabilitation Sciences, and I'm the Associate Director for the Center for Cognitive and Brain Health. And my area of study is physical activity, brain, and cognition.
Wow, and before we get to more about the science of exercise and how it impacts your brain, how'd you get interested in science?
Oh, that's an easy one. My father was a scientist. I grew up in inner city Boston, and at a pretty young age, probably, about the time you started your podcast, I was somewhere around 13, 14 years old, and I started to work in his lab. He's in a very different area of science than me. He's in molecular biology, genetics, and dentistry, oral
Oh, wow.
biology. And so I learned basic lab skills and spent a lot of my summers and after school hours when I wasn't playing sports working in his lab.
Wow. That's a really great way. The science is passed down generation by generation.
Yeah, and also I'll just say that I've taken that to heart, and so I routinely take high school students into my lab and have for many many years.
Wow, that's a great way to get the community involved in the amazing science you're doing in your lab.
Yeah, thank you.
So now let's get into the science of exercise. That's what
Yep.
this entire 200th episode is about, and it's really special for me. So let's get right into it. So, how is exercising and playing sports beneficial for your body?
Oh, well, you're asking a guy who only really studies from the neck up. But trained as an exercise scientist, we know that physical activity and exercise and sport are good for the body. In the best of moments, it's good for our lung capacity. If you run, you build strong lungs. We know it's good for muscle and bone, and that's things like weightlifting and gravity-based exercises. And so it's good for our circulatory system. It's good for it's good for really a whole host of aspects of our physical being, and it's good for the brain, which, as you know, is also an organ. We know uh, we know that physical activity decreases cancer risk in certain cancers. It's related to a number of different comorbidities, diseases. It's good for mental health. We are meant as a species to move. And nowadays, and we think about that in terms of sport and exercise, but there was a time when we thought about it in terms of the necessity to survive, right? And so we had to spend energy to get energy. And it's only very recently in our species that our own ingenuity has kind of outwitted us in the sense that we now what we used to need to move and spend energy on to do, uh, we've used technology to eliminate that, right? So
Mhm.
we no longer have to go hunt and gather for our food. We can punch a few numbers into our phone and all of a sudden pizza arrives, right? So there's an example for you.
Yeah, and that can also lead to some negatives on having humans not stay active anymore because technology since it's taking over most of humanity at this point. But if it starts going at the same rate without humans exercising, that could lead to really big health problems for our entire species.
That's true, and it already has, right? I mean, if you know, our genome was built to support movement and an active lifestyle, and the fact of the matter is that we no longer move at the rate that our genome expects, and so this has led to an obesity pandemic that's been around for a couple of decades now. Metabolic syndrome. I mean, we're basically at odds. Our metabolism that is at odds with the expectation and the delivery of what we actually normally do.
Wow. And there's also another side to this because if you look at things like these fitness trackers, it's also technology, but that also encourages you to move. So it depends on how you
Absolutely.
use technology.
How do I use technology?
No, like it depends on how you use
Oh,
technology in order to it could be bad for you and it could also be good for you.
absolutely right. And I don't think we should be shunning technology. I think we should be embracing it. I think we need to do so smartly, and I
Mhm.
think we need to use technology in different ways to encourage people to be physically active because we're not all the same.
Yeah, and it's varies by person to person, like you said. It depends.
That's right. That's correct.
All right, now let's get into the brain and what you mostly study. How does exercise impact the brain? What are some effects that it has on our mind and our for physical and even mental well-being?
Yeah, that's a good question. We know for decades now, we know that exercise has been good for the brain. There were animal models back in the 80s that showed effects on structure and function. Um, in the 90s, we started to understand this a bit more in terms of cognition, although I will say that was around even earlier. Um, and in the 2000s, we were able to leverage neuroimaging tools and really get to understand that physical activity is beneficial for the brain in a number of ways. And this is true in animals, it's true in humans. And I can break it down pretty straightforward across a couple of different lines of research. We know that a physically active lifestyle builds brain tissue, meaning that there are structural changes in the brain that occur as a function of being physically active.
Wow.
This is from randomized controlled trial research where you take sedentary people or less active people and you train them and you compare them to a group that got some other type of intervention and so we see differences in simply the structure of the brain. Uh, this is mostly true in specific areas rather than a generalized effect across all brain regions. And so, probably, if I were to highlight one, I would highlight the hippocampus. The hippocampus, a subcortical structure involved in learning and memory, it is very susceptible to physical activity intervention. So is the prefrontal cortex. Um, from a function perspective, we see differences in brain function as a function of physical activity involvement, be it randomized control trials, cross-sectionally, things of that nature. And what we're finding is that, again, it's selective, meaning that certain functions benefit, but not others. We see certain networks within the brain that subserve higher order cognitions like executive functioning and memory and those networks, brain function is improved as a function of being physically active, both within that network, meaning there's more integrity within the network, and across networks, because networks have some redundancy, but they also do unique things. And so when one is active, the other is not necessarily active. And so we see that distinction a bit better. On a cognitive level, we see effects on executive functioning. So this is what separates humans from other species, right? This is our ability to perform goal-directed actions, to act to selectively attend to things in the environment, to hold items in our memory and use them when necessary, to multitask, right? And so we think about executive functions in terms of our everyday life, in terms of inhibition, ignoring distractions and staying focused. This is what you do in school every day, right?
Mhm.
You have to focus on the teacher's lesson and not on the kids who are goofing around next to you.
Yep.
Working memory, you do this when you read a passage and have to hold information in your mind and then answer questions on a test, or maybe carrying the remainder in long division.
Mhm.
And then we call it cognitive flexibility, but this is essentially multitasking. You execute a task, You inhibit a second task, you then activate the second task, and you inhibit the first task, and you go back and forth. And humans all think we're really good multitaskers, but we're not. I mean, this is why there's laws against texting and driving and things like that. But what's interesting is that executive functioning appears to influence all of these areas. Um, sorry, physical activity influences all these areas of executive functioning. And then it also influences aspects of memory, like memories that are dependent upon the hippocampus. So hippocampal dependent memories. This is our ability to associate and form relationships among items in our environment in order to reconstruct them as necessary. And so what I mean by that is if you think about your, cute and fuzzy bunny hopping around in the wild, that bunny is looking for food. It's looking for other bunnies to procreate with, right? And it's also looking to avoid becoming food itself, right? It doesn't want to be hot lunch.
Yeah.
And so that bunny is going to remember when the predators are out, where the food is located, where the other bunnies are, where safety is, right? And so this is all driven by the hippocampus, and physical activity improves our ability to perform those sorts of tasks. And lastly, I guess I'd say two more, or I kind of have three more things to say kind of quickly. One is that in the case of school kids, we see these benefits extend to academic performance in terms of reading and math. Um, we see effects at different levels of the brain, meaning from molecular and cellular all the way up to systems and behavior. So, we're seeing at the most minute of levels, and we're seeing it on grander levels. And then lastly, I'd say is that we see benefits chronically. So if you perform physical activity daily within your life or several times a week, as recommended by our government, um, we see those benefits. We also see benefits acutely, meaning that if you go out for a walk for, say, 20 minutes or perform some high intensity interval exercise for just a few minutes, we will then see benefits acutely afterwards for, you know, 30 minutes to an hour afterwards.
Wow. So it depends on how long you do it and how often you do it, which really impacts how you perform in these everyday functions.
That's correct. Yeah.
So, why is it important to keep moving? And does it help you perform unrelated activities, like things unrelated to physical activity, such as strength training, everything? Because if you lift weights, you'll be able to hit your PR faster and easier. But how does that help you in your everyday life, like social talking and just those different things that you do in everyday life where you don't really notice, like remembering things, like you mentioned, the hippocampus, school kids. Why is it important to just keep exercising?
Yeah, so it's important to keep exercising for a number of physical and mental reasons, right? I mean, we haven't really touched yet that physical activity benefits mental health too,
Hmm.
depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, stress, all those things, and they all impact all aspects of your life, right? So that's really important. I mean, you might hear of people who, they get stressed out, maybe with their schoolwork, whatever, they go exercise, they feel better afterwards, they think more clearly afterwards. So it is important to be physically active. We've already kind of talked about the physical pieces.
Hmm.
It is never more important to learn to be physically active as a kid growing up because you need those tools. You need to know how to be physically active throughout your life because when you're older, you know, and your body isn't working as well as it once did, being physically active is beneficial to, your weight management, to diseases, to your organs, to muscle strength. I mean, I always say, and this might not ring a bell with you as a teenager, but it'll ring a bell with you when you're in your, 70s. And to have the muscle strength to take yourself, on and off the toilet is an important part of your older adulthood, you know. And to be able to act independently for as long into your life as possible is really an important piece of this. Um, you know, I think from an everyday life perspective, what's interesting about physical activity compared to other forms of intervention is that physical activity appears to have broad implications for how we perform in our daily lives. And what I mean by that is that there's, you know, we tr physical activity and say running or playing sports or you pick it, appears to have implications for other cognitive tasks away from being physically active. And if you compare that to other interventions like cognitive training, for instance, so you think about all these, apps out there to improve your memory and whatnot,
Hmm.
they do. They improve your memory, for instance, or your attention on that specific task, but there isn't a broad transfer, or it's very controversial as to whether there is a broad transfer to other forms of, say, attention or memory. And it appears that exercise has that transfer capability. And so, one of the things we like to say is that physical activity uh, allows for broad or generalized benefits to brain and cognition that are selectively and disproportionately stronger in specific aspects of brain and cognition.
Wow. It's kind of like the all-in-one thing for all things you do, and it also builds other skills, such as teamwork, or even it can build friendships, especially if you're playing sports like soccer or baseball, football. It can build those relationships with other people, and that's something completely unrelated to your physical health, but it's still really, really important.
That's right, actually. It's really that's really insightful. Actually, there's a whole social piece to exercise where you learn life skills, right? You learn how to be part of a team. You learn how to lead a team. You learn how to be led by someone else on your team. You learn how to work together and perform teamwork. And those skills, those transfer. Those transfer to the classroom. They transfer to your vocation. And they lead to the opportunity to meet other people who are like-minded to you. So they then reinforce your physical activity behaviors. So physical activity benefits the individual at a number of different levels, from cells to society.
Wow, it's so cool to see all this because it goes from your own health to the health of everyone around you, and also those soft skills that are pretty hard to build in just everyday society. But sports can help reinforce that, especially if you look at sports like soccer. You need to know those plays, you need to remember all the things you need to do, you remember all the rules because I know I watched a lot of soccer myself. There's lots of rules that you have to remember, and it helps your memory, like you said, the hippocampus, all of those things. It's just so amazing to see how
Yeah.
you all studied that. That's also a really, really big thing.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think you're right on the right track there.
Yep. And now let's move on to what you like to do. What's your favorite way to exercise?
Uh, uh, yeah, so it's certainly changed over the course of my life. As a kid, I was fortunate to play a lot of sports in high school. I played 4 different sports through high school:
Oh, wow.
soccer, basketball, baseball, and lacrosse. Um, I play none of them now. I've been a hockey player for much of my life. I love playing ice hockey, so that still feeds that teamwork, that fun atmosphere with your
Mhm.
your buddies and whatnot. And through most of the year, probably about 9 months a year, I played 2 to 3 days a week. Um, I also, as an adult, learned to enjoy nature, and we haven't even really talked about the benefits of nature and physical
Yeah.
activity. And so I really do like to hike, and I like to mountain bike. I'm a big mountain biker. So you can see a couple of my activities often lead me to injury, which we can really talk about also. Um, I do like to ski, and I still lift weights, but as I'm getting older, I've started to replace that a bit with yoga, and I've felt a lot better actually. It's not just building muscle strength, but learning flexibility and sustaining strength and core strength have been really key factors to me as I've gotten older to maintain my physical activity, my love of hockey and my love of mountain biking and whatnot. So those are the big ones. As a general rule, I try and be active 6 days a week. And that varies. It varies in terms of length. I mean, a hockey game can be an hour, hour and a half.
Hmm.
So can mountain biking, but and so could yoga for that matter. But things like weight training or can be 20 minutes or a half hour, and things like if I go for a hike, that could be 5 or 6 hours, right? If I decide to hike one of the White Mountains in New Hampshire.
Wait, before we go on with the rest of this interview, I asked my listeners what their favorite way of moving their body and exercising was on my Instagram story, and here's what they said. Tell me your favorite way to exercise and move your body and stay active on this Instagram story right here. Thanks for your responses. Now back to the interview. Yeah, it's really important to move every day, like you said, because all these benefits can only be felt if you are doing this on a consistent daily basis.
That's right. Yeah. And, and I won't rule out also, I do actively commute to work. I walk to the train, take the train into the city. And that was a very conscious decision when we moved home to Boston, when I moved back 9 years ago. It was a very conscious decision to leave the car in the garage.
Yeah, and those small things like walking around the neighborhood, which is which thing a lot of my listeners also do, walking around the neighborhood and just maybe just walking to the train station, like you said, those small things eventually add up.
That's right. You want to accrue physical activity throughout your daily life.
Yeah.
And that's what we know now, which we didn't even know really 10 years ago, was that, if you sit at your desk all day, like a lot of us do, and then go for a big bout of exercise at the end of the day, that might not have the same benefits that, making time each hour would have.
Wow,
So
that's
make the
just so
most,
interesting.
yeah, make the
Make the
most
most
of
of it.
your time, especially between classes, hopefully
Hmm.
your classes are other ends of the camp.
Yeah. So, what advice do you have for people who want to exercise more or stay active more?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I'd first say that we do have physical activity guidelines in America. We're the first country in the world to have guidelines. The WHO has them now, and countries like Canada and Australia have their own guidelines. Guidelines for school age, individuals, so we're talking 5 to 18, are to be physically active 60 or more minutes a day of moderate to vigorous physical activity. And that can be broken up. It can be intermittent throughout your day. Um, and that you should and some of those minutes should include muscle and bone loading. Okay. So those are the guidelines. What I'm going to tell you as an individual is we're not all the same. I'll tell you right now, if you ask me what I like to do, but you didn't ask me what I don't like to do. And I can't think of anything more boring than running on a treadmill, indoors, staring at a wall or a screen. Like I would not be committed to that for very long. And I think there's a lot of people feel that way. There's a lot of people who don't like to be, play team sports. They don't like the pressure of, having, you know, of letting their teammates down. And so I would encourage you to sample. So at first, and so what I'd say is that number one, build physical activity into your day. If you drive somewhere, park further away, walk in. If you can actively commute, actively commute. When you see an escalator, take the stairs. There are ways to build it into your everyday life. But in terms of developing something that you're going to do throughout your life, sample. Meaning like if you're someone who likes, whose thought is, well, I can go run on a treadmill and you don't like it, then stop. Go find something else. Maybe you like the exercycle better or the indoor rower. Maybe you'll realize that you like to run out in the trails and be out in nature. Find ways to enjoy being physically active. And the third thing I'll say is that try and make it social. Find your people. If you get into mountain biking and you like it, but you don't really know the different trails around where you live, and you're not really sure of things, figure out who your mountain bike organization is around you, and join them, right? They do fun rides, right? They do a ride on a Saturday where they like having new members. Find people who have similar interests to you, and you'll find that before you know it, you're actually done and you enjoyed it, and you can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I think the main thing about exercise is most people take it as another job or like another duty to do, but it should be something that's also fun and something that you like. Only then it can actually last as long as you live and you'll enjoy doing it even when you're older.
That's correct. And I guess the one caveat I'll say is that the number one reason why people don't exercise is because they say they don't have time.
Mhm.
But if you evaluate how you spend your day, I'm sure there are ways to substitute in some exercise throughout the day. So it's
Yeah,
not an
even
excuse.
yeah,
Yeah,
even when you're going to work or in school, you can just walk around. That's it.
absolutely. That's right.
That's so amazing. All the science that goes behind all this to get all these guidelines through. It's just all these years of work.
Yeah. I mean, we've been a field for a long time. There's a lot of really good science in our field. And we're a broad science. We're not, the same way psychology or biology is, the field of kinesiology, the study of movement, is from cells to society, and there's value in that work at all levels.
Wow. So speaking of science, what advice do you have for kids who are interested in science?
Well, I feel like you can answer that question better than me because you've done quite a good job as we're sitting here on your 200th episode. But I would say, much like the advice I gave before, figure out what interests you. And if you know you like aerospace or if you like chemistry, reach out to people. You'd be surprised how many labs would love to take a high school student for the summer. Um, you'd be surprised how many programs are out there to help introduce, younger individuals to science. Um, it's no secret. Science is under attack. A lot of people don't trust it, and we need really good people and interested folks to come into the field. And so, like I said, I routinely take high school students between their junior and senior year into the lab. In the last 9 years since I've been at Northeastern, I've taken 14 high school students, and several of them have gone on to really good universities and are science majors, and that really excites me. I helped light the fire in them. They got excited about it, and now they're neuroscience majors. Some will go to medical school or physical therapy school or what have you. Others want to get their doctorate and be professors or work
Wow.
in industry, and that's exciting for me. So. Um, that's my advice. Don't be afraid to send an email and say you're interested in science and you want to come work in their lab, or can they help guide you or work on your project with you? Because that's something that faculty do like to do.
Yeah, that's some really great advice, and it's all about lighting that spark. Of all these scientists I've talked to, including you, you've all lit a tiny piece of my spark myself, and that's why I keep doing this because I love talking to scientists, researchers about their interesting studies, and also about these everyday things like science of exercise, which I like doing those kinds of things where you take this everyday thing that you don't really think about and you go behind the science of it. So thank you so much to all the scientists and Dr. Hillman.
Yeah, thank you, Akshay, and congrats on your 200th episode.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me today. I really enjoyed it and learned so much about kinesiology, exercise, and the brain. So thank you so much for taking the time for me for this amazing 200th episode.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was an amazing interview, and thank you so much to Dr. Hillman for joining me for this 200th episode special. Thank you so much. Now, I want to take a look back because I've been doing spectacular science since 2020, and there's been a lot of evolution and a lot of new things that I've done over those 4 years. And I want to take a look back from 2024 to 2020. So let's rewind and take a look back.
Well, that was our first episode of Spectacular Science. This is the last episode in 2020. Mr. Spangler!
Huh, Akshay? What are you doing?
It actually sticks to and how many ice crystals there are. Now, to make sense of this, we have to zoom into the molecular level of water.
I'm so excited! Yes, finally! The day has arrived! Today is the 100th episode of Spectacular Science!
Hey listeners, welcome back to this episode of Spectacular Science. I'm your host, Akshay. Wow, from recording episodes in the closet to now talking to so many different scientists and recording in this studio. There's been a lot of evolution that's been going on since the past 4 years, and I'm so excited to see all that's in store for the future, all the new science discoveries and interviews that are in store for the future of Spectacular Science. And I want to thank all the people I've interviewed, and also you, my viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for encouraging me through this journey, and I hope to provide you with more content and more amazing science discoveries in the future. But now, I want to announce something very, very special I've been working on that I've been saving up for this 200th episode. You've probably been noticing that I've been wearing Spectacular Science themed t-shirts, and this hoodie right here is also Spectacular Science themed. Now, what if I told you could get your own? That's right, I'm launching Spectacular Science merch. You can get your own at shop.spectacularsci.com. There's things like these t-shirts. This one says I'm a spectacular scientist. There's this one. It has the Spectacular Science word art right there. And so many more. And you can head over to shop.spectacularsci.com and get your merch. This is for the 200th episode special, and this drop is for the 200th episode. So go get your merch right now. I've always wanted to do this since I started Spectacular Science, and look where we're at right now. Spectacular Science merch. And also, by buying this merch, you also support me and Spectacular Science in continuing my mission to spread the love of science to everyone in the world. So go ahead and buy your merch at shop.spectacularsci.com. I'm so excited to be launching this, and thank you so much for all your encouragement. Thank you so much for listening to this 200th episode of Spectacular Science. I'd once again like to thank Dr. Hillman for joining me for this amazing Spectacular Science 200th episode celebration. I also want to thank you, my listeners, for encouraging me through this entire thing, and also everyone I've interviewed so far. Thank you so much for all of your encouragement. I'd also like to thank my friends, my family, and everyone that's been there to support me through this entire journey. Thank you so much, and looking forward to more in the coming years. Thank you so much for listening to this 200th episode special of Spectacular Science. Spectacular Science produced and hosted by me, Akshay Raman. Our theme song and listening to music are by Chand Ramachandran. Please visit my podcast website, spectacularsci.com, to find interactive activities, articles, and blog posts. That's spectacularsci.com. Also, don't forget to grab your Spectacular Science merch at shop.spectacularsci.com. I released this for my 200th episode, so go grab your merch right now. That's shop.spectacularsci.com. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends and family. Thank you so much. This subscribing helps encourage me, and you'll be updated on all the new episodes and all the new science discoveries that are coming in 2025. Thank you so much again. Thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll see you on the next episode of Spectacular Science in 2025 in the next season. Keep thinking about science. Ow. I'm okay. I just forgot to turn on my lights.